As one of the three major religions in the world, Buddhism is gaining increasing popularity in the West despite its cultural origins and language barriers. And with the exchange of ideas between different regions, such as the first China-Canada-US Buddhist Forum, Buddhism is likely to become more influential. To discuss the many issues related to the development of Buddhism in the West, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Venerable Dayi Shi, President of the Buddhist Association of Canada and Abbot of Shaolin Temple, and Shen Weirong, Professor for Tibetan and Buddhist Studies at Tsinghua University. That's our topic. This is Dayi. I'm Yang Rui.
Buddhism first reached China from India roughly 2,000 years ago during the Han Dynasty, spreading through Central Asia along the Silk Road. And the establishment of the White Horse Temple signifies the first time Buddhism doctrines were brought to China. Han Dynasty China was deeply Confucian, and Confucianism is focused on ethics and maintaining harmony and social order in society. Buddhism, on the other hand, emphasized entering the monastic life to seek a reality beyond reality. But by the 2nd century AD, aided to some extent by the simplicity of its approach and some similarities with Taoism, it managed to gain a firm foothold and acquired a sizable following. Buddhism got stronger and stronger in China, which soon claimed the largest population of Buddhists, surpassing India. In the 6th century AD, Chinese people developed Chan Buddhism, also known as Zen Buddhism. Zen philosophy emphasizes meditation and experience over words and explanation. Among the most important figures of Chan Buddhism is the 6th Patriarch, Huineng, to whom the Platform Sutra of the 6th Patriarch is attributed. 3 different forms of Buddhism evolved in China as it reached the centers of population at varying times and by different routes. Eventually, they became known as Han, Tibetan and Southern Buddhism. It is estimated that China has more than 200 million Buddhism followers.
Welcome to our studio discussion here. Gentlemen, what do you think of the general trends in the development of Buddhism in the West? Because we only talk about and we only know some ideas about the Christianity and the Catholic Church. As to the influence of Buddhism in the West, I'd like you to brief our audience about what's going on now.
Buddhism in Canada, there are different schools. There are Theravada, the monks come from Thailand, Sri Lanka, Burma, and they also have Japanese Buddhism, Korean Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, and also they have Chinese Buddhism there. So I come from Chinese temple. So our temple is the first Chinese temple in Canada since 1967.
Were you elected freely and democratically? How come you became head of the temple and the director of the association?
That's the very interesting questions. When I was become monk, when I became monk, I was 16 years. I born in Canton. Then I studied Mainland Buddhist College in Xiamen. In the 1990, I immigrated to the United States and I studied the University of New York.
NYU?
Not NYU, it's the CUNY. They call the University of New York. And when I graduated from the university, my master come from Canada. His name is called Shen Weirong. He told me that, he said, to be a monk in American, undergraduate is not enough. You have to continue to study, to get a MA. That's why I went back to school to finish my MA. And then there were 3 founders of the Shaolin Temple. Their name is called Master Shen Weirong, Chen Xiang, Lodu, and they invite me to move to Canada for teaching Buddhism. And they also they appoint me to become an abbot of the Shaolin Temple. And later on, they select me to become the president of the Buddhist Association of Canada.
So the trajectory of your career development enabled you to become a director of the association and also abbot of the temple. Professor Shen, is it true that seniority, knowledge and education background are the most important factors that may have contributed to his promotion?
So I'm not a religious person, so I'm just a scholar for Buddhist studies. Maybe I should answer the first question. So how is the state of Buddhism worldwide? I think the Buddhism now is reviving in the Asia, but now I think rapidly developing in the West. I think after quite a long period, Tibetan, not only Tibetan Buddhism or Chinese Buddhism stopped to develop in China, but now the Buddhism enters a so-called golden age. I think you see everywhere now in China. So the huge monasteries, big temples are built, and the big Buddha statues you can see everywhere. So Buddhism is truly reviving. But in the West, is a different story. I think the Buddhism also is considered as one of the three major so-called world religion. But the Buddhist in the West is still a small minority.
Let's look at the driving force behind the development of Buddhism in present-day China. Is it because of greater latitude in official policies, meaning authorities at different levels throughout the country start to develop greater tolerance, or is it because people are getting rich, so they make contributions to the construction of temples and the monasteries? Which one counts most?
I think it is one of the major facts that the Buddhism was supported by not only the government, but also by the large, how to say, the Chinese society. So people not only getting rich, not only because of that they support Buddhism, they wanted to keep or maintain the Chinese cultural tradition. And then Buddhism is a major part of our Chinese cultural tradition. And the second, I think, after a long period of so-called the intellectual ideological struggle, so we came back to our origin, so to our cultural, we trace back to our cultural tradition. Then we pay attention to so-called reviving our cultural tradition, like not only Confucianism or Taoism, but also Buddhism. And to my observation, Buddhism now, I think, is developing even faster and widely than Confucianism and Taoism. And I think Buddhism is the only religion, I would say. So now in China is besides the Muslims, Islam, and we cannot really consider Confucianism is a religion. Even Taoism, if we would talk about the Zhuangzi and the Laozi, that's not a religion. But Buddhism is more like dominated the religious belief of Han Chinese. Then in other part we have a large population of Tibetan, of Mongols. They belong to the other Buddhist tradition, so-called Tibetan Buddhism. The Tibetan Buddhism now is even, I think, developed faster than Han Chinese Buddhism. Is it because of the
international cloud of the Dalai Lama, which may have been promoted by the image and the influence of the Dalai Lama, may have been promoted by Western media, which, they may have politicized.
This is, I think, not only the Dalai Lama is not also the major.
It's a powerful symbol.
Major fact, because China, I think, now reached this stage of a postmodern society. We are repeating what had happened in the West. If you look at the 70s and 80s in California, for example, in US, Tibetan Buddhism became very popular and increasingly popular. Tibetan Buddhism became a so-called an alternative religion for the West. They still hold on, how to say, the Christianity, hold on the Islam, but is Tibetan Buddhism is an alternative.
But I'm afraid, I know your major, the academic research has been focusing on Tibetan Buddhism. We'll come back to examine the differences, if any, between popularity and influence concerning Buddhism in the West. Are you surprised, Venerable Dayi Shi, that Buddhism comes back stronger and is fast emerging stronger than other major schools of religions, such as Taoism? But we won't call Confucianism religion. It's about political ethics. But tell me your thoughts about the influence of Buddhism in mainland China.
You mean today?
Today, right? Why we have such a large following of Chinese Buddhism here in mainland China?
You know, in our life, we have the spiritual and material should be balanced. So today, China people got a lot of physical material. Yeah, so they need the spiritual. That's why Buddhism in China is growing up and up, and more people believe in Buddha, because Buddhism not just the religion. Buddhism also
it's about philosophy,
education. Because the Buddhism, Sigamuni Buddha talk about the wisdom, compassion, equality, cause and effect. It's very useful for people to practice daily life. So it's not just believe in Buddha, also help people to understand what is the real life, what is the happy life.
But when we look at the general trends of Buddhism in modern society, be it in China or in the West, one thing that has puzzled me for a long time, that is what's happening in the Shaolin Temple, the alleged commercialization of martial arts. Shi Yongxin, the Venerable, he was involved in extensive controversies and the media fanfare about martial arts there, whether it's being used for money. What do you think of the core issues concerning commercialization of some of the religious sites inside China?
Buddhism, they have many different ways to practice. And one of the very important way to practice is called Chan. In English, it's called meditation. In Japanese, it's called Zen. Yeah. So Shaolin Temple is the Bodhidharma was their practice Chan in there many years, and it influenced a lot. Even not just China, even the like Western, they still know Bodhidharma in Shaolin Temple. And I think why the people they like Shaolin Kung Fu, because not just Kung Fu. When they practice Shaolin Kung Fu, also have the Zen idea, meditation idea, or Chen idea.
I think Buddhism is not a major political issue, or we cannot talk that Buddhism already have a great influence on politics worldwide, or also even in China. Buddhism became more and more popular because Buddhism represents a lot of virtue that we are really looking for, seeking for. Like why Buddhism now in the West became more and more popular, and because we always appreciate the Buddhist idea, like the non-violence and friendly to the environment, and also the equality between man and woman. All those, even I think some ideas are imagined, is not truly Buddhism. We talk about the meditation on the emptiness, and which represents the compassion or love, or all those things. I think became a so-called a discourse, which the Westerners really appreciate. And this kind of discourse became very influential and influenced the daily life even of the everyday people.
For those who
do not have to be a Buddhist, but they are very much influenced by this kind of idea.
To my poor knowledge about Buddhism, we have different kinds of practitioners. Those who live in the temple, practicing meditation every day, around the clock even. But there are others who are what we call 居士, right? They do not necessarily choose to live in the
lay believer.
seclusion of a temple. So how do you look at the balance between religious practice and secular life? For example, you have the mobile phone, the smartphone, you can use WeChat to communicate with the outside world. Then will that secular aspect seriously undermine the Buddhist fundamentalism? I wonder if I've used the correct word, fundamentalism. It tends to be used by the West to characterize Islamism. What do you think of the relationship between the secular life and your religious practice?
In the Buddhism, they have a term called 不二法门. What does it mean? It means you can be a lay person. You also can be a good Buddhist. Yeah, because the Buddhism, just like Professor Shen mentioned about that, is help you to practice, to purify your mind. Yeah, so doesn't matter what religion you have, what skin you are, what language you speak. Everybody have a Buddha nature. Secondly, say that everybody have Buddha nature. Everybody can become Buddha. If you do a lot of good things, sooner or later you can become Buddha.
But actually, what I concern is maybe the opposite. Many people claim they are Buddhist, but they're just sitting in their comfortable living room and meditate and think about the love and the compassion. They claim I'm a Buddhist, but I didn't do enough. That's not the whole purpose of Buddhist practice.
Are you suggesting actually these are superstitions?
It's not superstitions, not superstitions, because they simplify the Buddhist practice. They saw that I'm already Buddhist. I meditate. I think of compassion and love, but Buddhism is something else. Buddhism is also not really seeking for material, for example, the games. Also not exactly the spiritual enlightenment. What we think of this. Buddhist practice, the goal for the Buddhist practice is attain the Buddhahood, right. And we want to be enlightened. And we want to leave this samsaric world, this world. That's why now there are a lot of so-called pseudo living Buddhas or this kind of self-claimed Buddhist masters. They became very popular. Now it became a big issue, because a lot of people they claim I'm a Buddhist, but they are looking for something else. That's why they're easily cheated by this kind of Buddhist masters.
Thank you so much. You are watching Dialogue with the Venerable Dayi Shi, President of the Buddhist Association of Canada and Abbot of Shaolin Temple. We are also talking to Shen Weirong, Professor of Tibetan and Buddhist Studies at Tsinghua University. And our discussion is the topic of how influential is Chinese Buddhism in the West, and how do we promote influence of Chinese culture or construction of soft power after China is fast getting so close to the center stage of world economy and perhaps international politics. We'll be back in a short while. Stay with us, please. Welcome back. How come that Buddhism has become so popular as well as influential in in South Asia, like in Sri Lanka, India, and I'm most impressed by the enormous influence of Buddhism in Thailand, which is known for a country of smiles.
I think because, for example, like Sri Lanka, I just come from Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka is very close to India. And their culture, their tradition is very similar. So it's easier to copy the way of the Buddha's life. To practice Buddhist way every day. For example, like the monks in there, they don't cook by themselves. Every early morning, they go out to ask the food from the people. So the lay people can accept that. They every morning prepare food for the monks. But in China, monks, if they go out to ask the food from the lay people, no one give it to them, because the custom difference.
I think if we talk about Buddhism, we have to think Buddhism is an Indic religion. So Buddhism came from the Indic area, the South Asia area. That's not because the Buddhism.
You mean Hindu?
Hindu is Indic, is not Hinduism. Hinduism is something different. It's not Buddhism. It's the original, the older Indic religion. But the Buddhism is from this area. Is not exactly from India. For example, the Buddha was born in Nepal, in the South Asia area. So those area for more than several thousand years is already a Buddhist country. That's why they keep this tradition. And then Buddhism introduced into through Central Asia, through the Silk Road into China, and then developed into so-called Chinese Buddhist tradition. And the Mahayana Buddhism became very popular. Then we have other traditions called the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, both Mahayana Buddhist tradition, but they became more and more popular, better known in the world. But in the origin, I think the South Asia Buddhism is how to say, a very important Buddhist tradition. And we should not forget, actually, the Buddhism came from this area. So no wonder why they still...
You stayed in Germany for a number of years, and now you also traveled to the United States and stayed in Japan for a couple of years. You have a very sound background about the influence of Buddhism in these countries. How... We don't know why Tibetan Buddhism proves so much more influential than other forms of Buddhism. Is it because of the political influence of the Dalai Lama? And he has been used to criticize China. What can you tell us about the enormous influence of Tibetan Buddhism in the West?
I think we can, again, we have to think this issue in opposite way. It's not because of Dalai Lama Tibetan Buddhism became so influential, so powerful, but because Tibetan Buddhism became so popular, so influential, that helped Dalai Lama to be lifted as this kind of symbol of a Western compassion and the representative of the whole Tibetan Buddhist tradition.
But don't you think they have, in doing that, they have created a myth about Tibet and the Tibetan culture?
The Tibetan Buddhism is how to say, is glorified. And the Tibetan Buddhism now is a so-called a world religion in this our globalization age. So becomes an alternative religion for all the world. But Tibet is no more Tibet. Tibet is a Shangri-La. Is a virtual Tibet. And the Tibetan Buddhism became how to say far away from the original form of the Tibetan Buddhism. Tibetan Buddhism represents everything that we anxious to have. Like I said, there's a non-violence, compassion, wisdom, love, all those things. Because we're looking forward for this, and Tibetan Buddhism became a spiritual supermarket of the postmodern society in the West.
Let's take a second look at the relationship between Buddhism and politics. In Myanmar, for example, during the period of transition from military junta to democracy, Aung San Suu Kyi, of course, was elected into office. She's the real leader of the opposition, and senior Buddhists took part in the protests against the military junta to support the democratic movement in Myanmar. But usually, religion should keep a distance, should be divorced from political realities. Can you understand why Myanmar Buddhism has been so deeply involved in political movement?
In the Buddhism, we have the two ways to practice. One called Hinayana, another way called Mahayana.
Which means?
Hinayana means to take care of yourself. You go to the mountain and practice by yourself. You don't care about other people. Mahayana Buddhism, we call Bodhisattva. In Chinese, we call Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva, you have to take care other people's. Then you can become a Buddha whole. So just like, a very good example, the senior monk protect the Sakyamuni Buddha's the relics, right? In Xi'an city, in the Shanxi province, Shi. So when they want to destroy that, and the monk burn their body because they are protected Buddhism. I think it's a very similar idea. It's to try to to help to wake up people.
Right. The last question is very much about the future of the world. We've been talking about the 和谐社会, the construction of a harmonious society. And the Belt and Road Initiative is intended to build such a world order without having necessarily the evil dichotomy of confrontational approaches, having one as opposed to the other, zero-sum game, a legacy of the Cold War. Now, what is the teaching of Buddhism in this area?
I think Buddhism can make a great contribution to the future harmonious society in the global village. I think a lot of Buddhist idea has been already accepted and appreciated by the Westerners. I don't think the Buddhist was never a missionary religion. We're not really going to forcefully introduce Buddhism into the West and force all those Westerners converted into Buddhism. That's not our purpose, not the issue. But we want to use our wonderful ideas, love, compassion, non-violence, friendly to the environment, to help the world become a better place. I think
now, Venerable Dayi Shi, are you surprised that we've never had any religious warfare between and among Buddhists in mainland China, unlike the Christian crusade against Muslims in the Middle East or sectarian violence in the volatile region of the Middle East? We have never had any major bloody conflict between and among Buddhists themselves in the history.
In Buddhist history, we don't have any violence.
Because of their teaching on tolerance?
Yes, because the Buddha always talk about we have to compassion.
Compassion.
We have to respect each other. Even though we have different beliefs, we have different religion, but we still have to respect each other. Why? Because everybody have Buddha nature.
Thank you so much. The broad smile on your face, as well as the profound knowledge of Professor Shen, have enlightened our understanding about the influence of Buddhism, not just in mainland China these days with our modernization drive, but also in Canada. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.